Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family.
Okay.
All right, here we are. This is Toby Osmond. He's gallery director. Happened to be in a cafe again. Last one we had, Toby, I had in the cafe with the big black swan.
Oh, okay.
Now we've got the view.
Should I tell you a little bit about this painting?
Yes, please do so.
So behind us, we have a painting by Imajala Curley. Imajala, otherwise known as Mrs. Curley. Mrs. Curley is an APY artist, which is the APY sits in the northwestern corner of South Australia. Six very strong and very remote artist communities, that we have the privilege of working a lot with. And Mrs. Curley is somewhat of a queen in the APY, and in her community, Freegon sits. I mean, just for your students, sits, if you hop across the border from Uluru to South Australia, that's about where Mrs. Curley is.
That's
But as you can see, these big, wonderful abstractions and very contemporary. So, that's, when we talk about the Aboriginal art industry, contemporary Aboriginal art industry today, I think people are still, sort of realizing that, this is, it's just big contemporary abstractions where the industry is at. It's not necessarily all the sort of finer dot paintings or, iconography and things. I'm sure there is a very important place for that, but now
it's evolving.
It's evolving.
Yeah,
it's evolving.
No, I mean, one of the things that struck me a long time ago, and this relates to global citizenship and I think the place of Indigenous people in that, is that Judith Watkins and is represented with a bunch of other Indigenous people in Paris, right on the Seine there. There's a thing you go down in, which is absolutely stunning sort of environment. So, you might not know what I'm talking about.
I know that there's been a lot of Pompidou, which is
Pompidou,
at the Pompidou, which is really exciting. There's a massive, they're calling it like the second wave almost of interest in contemporary Aboriginal art. The industry is really exploding again, which is really great. I just know about our little gallery here, all the way up in Moree.
Yeah, we're in Moree, by the way. We kind of segued straight into this, but yeah, we're in Moree.
But I know we sell extensively all around the world, and there's these interesting little hotspots sort of in Europe. Brussels has always been very strong, Paris has always been really strong.
Yeah.
And then we sell a lot to the US. What is quite interesting to see sort of what different countries are buying. The Americans, they want to see the work. They want you really fine, dotty work. They want to know that somebody's been sitting there working on the canvas for 3 months.
Yeah.
Whereas the French, as we all know, are a little bit more expressive. And so they tend to go for, the wild sort of Western desert and APY works with the big, broader gestural brush strokes, which is the work that actually excites me as well. But
that I bought that Sam Miller because it's just so graphically stunning. I was thinking, there's so much more behind that. And I see it, of course, very white for the Western eyes. I've grown up in an arts family, but it's a graphic visual arts family, and it's quite different. Well, reading this stuff I've been reading Margot Neal's book on Solomon from the exhibition from Canberra. Yeah, it's really stunning. From my perspective, I've waved at these guys. I don't know whether you've paid any attention to me waving at you, but to me, there's something else happening there. Do the Americans or the Parisians or anybody else ask questions about what's happening behind the work?
Look, I mean, I see it as an important part of my role to, an entry point to Aboriginal art. For a white person, and I mean, I'm not Indigenous myself, the entry point is often through colour and what you're responding to and colours that you like to be with, and even just something that's aesthetically pleasing to you, as a lot of this work is. That's fantastic, and also, you have to remember that, it's a very important revenue stream going back into these communities. But as I was just to answer your question, Marcus, there was, I see an important part of my job to actually explain the story behind the works, because you have to remember that, you know, a lot of these artists and communities that we work with, they're not financially driven, you know, and but the reason that they are painting is to commit their story to something before they pass on. And you do see a lot of the time that, you know, people as say for example, if we're looking at you know, the APY communities in Northern and the Pitjantjatjara people, they are a lot of the time it's, you know, people will pick up the brushes as they're approaching the end of their lives, because it's how they pass on knowledge.
Yes, it strikes me as quite unusual that it seems that many of them are over 60 or 70. Painting away, you see these old ladies with all the grey hair,
the bees, and you know, I mean, and then what happens is you know, they can pick up and when we work with artists that started painting at the age of 80, and then
this is the local Moree community.
This is I mean, I should explain with our gallery that we're an Aboriginal owned and Aboriginal. Our parent company is an initiative called Aboriginal Employment Strategy. But we only work with the Aboriginal owned and operated art centres, but right from outside of, you know, where we are here in Gallipoli country, but right around Australia. That's you know, that the art centre model is a lane that the only lane really that we're comfortable working in.
It's kind of cooperative, isn't it? That's I thought I'd seen it somewhere when I read up on this.
The art centres are essentially sort of owned by the community. But you have to remember there's communities, you know, Moree is a small country town, but the communities that I'm talking about, sometimes it can essentially be two families. And anyway, they are, so it's so much more than a place that people paint. It's you know, there's communities, it's not like they've got a Woolworths on the corner, you know, there's nothing. Really
you do have a Woolworths on the corner.
Yeah, we do. But anyway, there is you know, so it's a place that, you know, people would just generally go and hang out every day. It's a place where the elders can, you know, keep an eye on the young ones, you know, it's a place where knowledge is shared, law is passed down, and also they do, you know, in the smaller communities, they'll often operate as a health clinic as well. You know, so visiting doctors and nurses and things like that, they will sort of, you know, be able to go about their business from operating from the art centre. So yes, it's and then, you know, culturally Aboriginal people love to sort of sit down and have a yarn, and you know, and it's a place where, you know, they're very noisy, loud, lively places, these art centres, and they're, you know, and then I've been, you know, very privileged to visit quite a few of them over the years. That they it's still at the heart and soul of the community, so to speak.
So when you talk about health, one of the things, of course, and this comes out particularly in the reading Margot Neal's stuff, is that it's the health of story, the health of memory, and which is another kind of community health dimension, which I don't think we're so caught up in physical health. We forget about cultural health, and I think this course is about global citizenship, and it's designed to help students understand citizenship as not to do with the nation state, but to do with belonging. And of course, the global means, well, we belong to the planet, but we can also belong to Moree, to the local community, to, in Indigenous terms, to land and country and so on as well.
Absolutely.
Can you say something about that? Because really, that's why I've got him here, is to actually talk about, you know,
you know, again, as you know, we touched on it just before, how, you know, for these artists, sort of, you know, the sale of their art and that kind of thing is you know, definitely fantastic, because, you know, it's money going back to community. But over and over and over again, when I'm working with these communities, there's always this mention of keeping culture strong. Keeping culture strong is of huge significance to them. You know, you have, and then the other thing about, you know, the art centre model, the art centres is sort of, you know, we talk about the return to country movement when a lot of Aboriginal people out in the central and western desert and APY land so moved into government-run settlements or missions, you know, in you know, starting from, you know, the 20s and 30s all the way through to, you know, the 1980s. But anyway, from the 1980s on, we've seen what we refer to as return to country movement. So it's people who are, there's a lot of the settlements and missions that they were living from, they did, some of them talk about those days quite fondly, except their connection to their own country runs so deep that the issue with a lot of those settlements is that they, for example, not Matamili, Matu people, Matu people weren't living on Matu country. And and then there's a connection to those stories. What is very important, stories belong to a person and they also belong to country, and so
the same as me, my phone.
Apologies.
That's okay.
Keeping culture strong. There is also language is another very important thing. We have to, remember that.
Yeah.
When the white collar first sort of got to this country, there was apparently up to 600 languages. And then as of sort of 10 years ago, something there was only about 90 of those languages that were still observed. So there is a huge push now, to actually to actually go back and learn a lot of these languages and to pass this sort of on. And you see, there's a bit of a fire in a lot of the younger Aboriginal people that that I work with here at the gallery and at some of these communities. And then there's they're extremely passionate about sort of kind of connecting a lot of these sort of lost threads, these threads that were lost through language and story and things like that.
Yeah, okay, that is possibly kind of leading to the second of the two questions that I asked, which is what gives you hope?
Yeah.
So it would be, from my perspective, I think you've got a dream job in some respects. Of course, you'd have a lot of admin and stuff, but I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, this little place is like a sanctuary. Every time I come to Moria, as you know, I always come here and grab a coffee or whatever and wander through the gallery. Is this something that gives you hope, or are there other things that give you hope? We can see a lot of dark things around the world. That's my phone again, big one. But of course, we know that Indigenous people, for all the wonderful things that are happening, are still very much behind the eight ball in terms of life expectancy and all these other things. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there that's happening, which of course could lead you to be rather depressed and angry, bitter and twisted. So my question to you is, what gives you hope?
Well, this place, the Yamagana Centre, is hugely significant because Maori has always had a large Aboriginal community. Historically, there's been, some very well-documented issues in the past. The freedom rides, most notably led by Charlie Perkins in the late 60s, when a group of students from, universities in Sydney and Melbourne, they got on a bus and demanded that Aboriginal people be allowed into the local swimming pool, and then they won that, and that was a huge step forward. And because Maori, what's so important about Yamagana is that people rolling into town, they'll sort of, at the beginning of the main street, they'll see this big white building. I try and stay, as a non-Aboriginal person, I try and stay behind the scenes as much as possible. But, they'll walk into our gallery cafe and then they're met by a team of, terrific young Indigenous people from the Gamilaroi community. And it's interesting, so a lot of these preconceived ideas that people will have of the town, it immediately softens that image when they walk in here, because some people are actually really even surprised to see an Aboriginal person on the main street in this town, given that the dark history that this town has had. And anyway, so to me, this is sort of, this is definitely a beacon of hope, then, I know, I've sort of lived in this area. So I grew up in this area, grew up on a farm about an hour north of here, and sort of every Saturday morning, we'd come into town just for sports or shopping or whatever it was, and then I wouldn't see an Aboriginal person working in the main street, this is sort of in the 1980s, and then now the Aboriginal community is active in all areas of the community.
Apparent here, isn't it?
Which is so significant.
Okay.
Even in the 10 years that Yamagana has been here, I've just seen so much change that's happened in that time. I really hate to say it, but 10 years ago, there probably was members of the community that didn't want to come in here. and then that's definitely changed now. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's very helpful because, of course, these actions are bridge building.
Yeah.
Between worlds, aren't they? Really?
Absolutely.
And I think that's very important. But I really want to thank you for giving me the time and giving these guys the time. Sharing a little glimpse in here. Hopefully you'll all jump on in cars or whatever and come and visit here because it's actually really terrific place. Good coffee too. I recommend their coffee. So we'll stop here, Toby. But and thank you so much.
Excellent.